For the last 3 days, we've been celebrating the first 20 years of the JBI. And at all birthday parties, as you know, there's a point at which we have a cake and we're told we need to blow out the candles. When I was small, I was always told to make a wish when I blew out the candles. And an undisclosed number of years on, but similar to those that Lisa has on her calendar, I recognise that making a wish doesn't actually mean that what you wish for will come true. It requires action as well. So our On the Couch session this afternoon, far from looking back, is trying to look forward and think about our individual and collective wishes in terms of our actions for the future and how we want to see JBI continue to develop. So on our panel this afternoon, we were due to have 4 members, but Philip Pledge, unfortunately, is still poorly, and so we wish him the best of health very soon. So our first panel member is the Honourable Rob Knowles, the Chair of the JBI Advisory Committee. He's a former Minister of Health for Victoria, Chair of Mental Health Australia, and was also Commissioner of the National Health and Hospital Reform Commission. He's got a strong interest in services for people with a lived experience, their families and carers. Familiar to us all is Professor Margaret Harrison, Professor Emeritus at Queen's University School of Nursing in Canada. Margaret's also a member of the JBI Advisory Committee and has been pivotal in shaping JBI as we've gone along. She's an enthusiastic advocate of implementation science and how we get evidence into practice. And last but not least, Associate Professor Zoe Jordan, Executive Director of the Joanna Briggs Institute. And as many of us know, she's passionate about health communication and how we communicate effectively in a global society. So the plan for the afternoon is that we're going to have a conversation, and at some point we'll actually ask you to join in that conversation, and then we'll hand over to Craig at the end of the day for our awards. So, I suppose the one thing we know in the future is that there will always be change. And the past has seen us fulfil the promise of JBI to this point. And I wondered if you could reflect on where we are now and whether or not we have the agility and the resilience to respond to the changing face of healthcare globally.
Okay. I've been saying to people over the last couple of days in thinking about this panel, I was a little envious of the panel this morning because it's really easy to talk about the past. It's somewhat more difficult to talk about the future. But I think it's important for us to talk about the immediate past if we're going to talk about the future. And certainly I think it's fair to say that when any significant figurehead like Alan, departs an organisation like JBI, there is some unsettled feeling about, what the future might hold and whether or not, I think we wondered whether or not we could outlive or outsurvive his leadership. I'm going to refer to, just after he departed, I'm going to call it, we had a little disruption. It's the best way I can think of describing it. And that was really unsettling, and I think that made us, fearful that it might all implode. But in fact, it was probably a really important, thing to have happen because it galvanised us in Adelaide as a team, but it also galvanised, I think, our JBC in a way that perhaps wouldn't have happened otherwise. And it also gave some of us an opportunity to step out from behind the long shadow that perhaps Alan, as a very tall man, cast, and to be able to start thinking about things in a fresh, different way. And I think no matter what we do moving forward, I'm really confident to be able to say that it will always be with Alan's original vision in mind, but perhaps just, moving it forward in a, slightly fresher, different different way. And we're certainly working with the advisory committee in a different way to what we ever have before, and with the JBC in a different way to what we ever have before. And I think that creates enormous opportunity, which is really exciting.
That's an interesting question, Heather, and it's loaded. And I think when I look back, I think where we've come and we've taken our place in the world is in the world of synthesis. I think that we've got our place, we've got our collaboration with the other international players, we've strengthened our methodology, we're continuing to strengthen our methodology. It's very encouraging how much infrastructure we have in place now for that, because essentially being this methodological collaboration, we have to keep moving forward. And I think as we look to the future and looking more towards the implementation side, I know that's going to come as no surprise, but we've always had the dual mission, but the need was to always more fully develop the synthesis piece. And I think it's time now, and if we really want to take our place in the world, and we would be the best ones to do that in terms of being the international implementation expertise, that's where we need to go. And I think some of the beginnings that we've had with under Craig's leadership and in that area, that's going to be very helpful. And I think that's where we need to, before it gets snapped away from us, because everybody's interested in it right now, even Cochrane, and they think they can probably move into it, and they have moved into it in certain spheres of it, but not how JBI is talking about it, where you're actively working with the end users. That would be my reflection on that question.
Yes, I think it's a great question. Does JBI have the agility? My answer is I don't know. But I think it's important that JBI make sure that it develops the agility. The one thing that we know about the world in which we now live is that in almost every industry there are disruptors coming in completely unpredictable, completely out of left field. They haven't happened so much in health, but I'd predict they will, without having any idea what that might look like. But the strength of JBI means that you are marshalling the knowledge, you're focusing on those things that have to change if we are to help patients, families and communities gain the benefit of the discoveries and the knowledge that we continue to develop. But there are other things happening in healthcare, certainly in the developed world, although it's most emphatically, I can only really speak authoritatively in Australia. But utilisation rates of healthcare in both the public sector and the private sector, we have a mixed public-private mix of healthcare delivery in Australia. Utilisation rates of healthcare continue to escalate at a rate that can't be explained by population growth, by demographic change, or advances in knowledge and technology. That is of great concern to the funders, whether they be public or private funders, and they are constantly looking at ways in which they can curb some of that growth. What we do need to make sure they understand, they appreciate, and they capture the work of JBI in fact looking at what is the available evidence at this point that leads to the best outcome. The other trend that we're experiencing in this country, I'm not sure about others, but we're having an increased focus by external bodies where things haven't quite worked well with the benefit of hindsight. Whether that's through coronial hearings, whether that's through legal intervention, through litigation, those mechanisms, or more recently through a much stronger focus on clinical governance. And how do we ensure that the evidence you have generated, marshalled and publicised is fed in to ensure that those examinations aren't determinations by people who don't generally have detailed knowledge, but will pontificate and whose decisions will have an impact on the way healthcare is delivered. So I think what I've observed in my time here is a much significant strengthening of the collaboration between the centres, a much stronger focus of JBI. I think the move of JBI to the university has been a really great plus. It has given a level of sustainability that couldn't have been guaranteed under the old model. There are plenty of challenges involved with that. As Zoe said, we've seen a strengthening of the advisory committee and the use of the advisory committee not as a management body, but as a body that brings together a wide range of experiences and expertise from right around the world to provide advice to value add to the decision-making processes that occur within JBI and within the collaboration. So I think on the one hand we need to make sure that all of those things continue to strengthen and work constructively together, but we also need to make sure that we never become complacent about the fact that translation and its implementation of evidence is, as Margaret said, very trendy, but trends tend to come and go. How do we actually make sure that we keep that approach embedded in the ongoing delivery of healthcare? And that will require a level of agility, the nature of which we mightn't be able to predict at this point.
Zoe, do you think there are any characteristics of the way we are now that will actually help us respond in an agile way and in a way that, if you like, keeps us resilient?
Yeah, look, I think the way, particularly the way in which the JBC works now, will help with that. And I think that we've seen, that the JBC is not only, as I was saying, not only galvanised as a single entity, but the regions in particular have really solidified their identity, if you like, within their different jurisdictions. And I think there's great power in that. And I think that that's something that we will certainly utilise a lot more moving forward politically, as well as, in clinical, but to influence and drive. And I think that that's something that we'll certainly work, a lot with the JBC on.
Okay.
The other point that I'd make, which we haven't referred to yet, is that it's a shame that Philip wasn't able to join us, but the work of the Foundation in generating funds for the development of the clinical fellowships, I think is a magnificent contribution to healthcare around the world. And I think given their commitment, we'll see a strengthening of that, which again reinforces that partnership, but a significant investment in the ongoing building of capacity around the world for good healthcare.
I think those give us the opportunity to be relevant wherever we are, and I think that's the truly important part of what we do, is we have to be relevant both clinically and academically wherever we're positioned. So I think that's that's really important for us. So over the last few days, we've heard quite a lot through the conference about the challenges that evidence-based healthcare faces and some of the innovations that will actually help us meet those challenges and that will perhaps feature in the way we do our work in the future. And I suppose looking forward is always looking at what might the opportunities be, where are the opportunities for the JBI and the collaboration to actually seize those opportunities and make the most of them, either in our networks or within the collaboration, so that we are able to lead, in part, the evidence-based practice community.
I think opportunity for us increasingly lies in relationships, and building those relationships, whether those are with key stakeholder groups locally for the Institute in South Australia, which is something that we've certainly been working on in the last couple of years. Relationships, obviously, with the advisory committee, with the committee of the JBC, with Walters Kluwer. All of those relationships lead to different opportunities for innovation, for doing things differently, for addressing things regionally, for remaining relevant. I think there's a lot of different things that we might do with each of those groups, and I think that's certainly where I see a lot of opportunity. I was telling a story to some of you in one of the breaks about our relationship with Cochrane. And certainly, as Alan stated this morning, there's been a shift. We've always had a relatively friendly relationship with Cochrane. But over the years, there have been, I think it's fair to say that there have been several approaches by JBI to various members of the Cochrane executive to work more closely, to do things, together. And those haven't always been received warmly, or they've been received politely, but perhaps not warmly. And I was saying how when I first started at JBI, I was sent off interstate to attend a Cochrane conference or workshop or something. I can't remember now, it's so long ago. But I distinctly, the thing I do remember about that event was that in the morning tea I went to introduce myself to a group of Cochranites, and very naively, so young and naive, walked up and introduced myself as Zoe from JBI, and I am not joking when I tell you that they physically turned their backs on me. And I was astonished. I just had no idea that I would, I was not expecting that kind of reception. 2 years ago, roughly, I think it was, Craig and I were in the UK, and we were invited to go and meet with the Cochrane executive. So, and Bridie was with us at that meeting, and it was astonishing. I presented first. I presented about JBI and the JBC and what the relationship is like and what our business model is like, and they were madly taking notes. And then we had this discussion about different opportunities that there might be for collaboration, and it was us sitting there saying, oh no, we don't really need you for that. We do very well by ourselves, thank you very much. But if you've got some other ideas, then we might consider them. It was a real change in the dynamic, and Craig and I very calmly, with wonderful poker faces, which I have never had before, but I've worked on it. We walked out of that meeting and we got halfway down the street and we looked at each other and we high-fived because we were so chuffed with how that meeting went. We were just so astonished that in the change in that dynamic. And I think we now have an MOU with Cochrane. We're working more closely with Campbell, with Grade. We now obviously Zach's led the spearheaded the Grade Centre. And all of those relationships, I think, open up lots of different opportunities for us. And Zach was saying in an earlier session, we don't want to recreate the wheel where things are already being done very well. We don't want to replicate that. We want to be focusing, as Margaret suggested, on the things that are unique to JBI, where we have real strength and where we can offer something new and different. And I think there is plenty of that within JBI and the JBC as well.
So, Margaret, I know you have a perspective on this that won't come as a surprise to the audience.
Well, I think one of the areas that is both an opportunity and it's probably going to be a bit of a challenge, but now that JBI is academically based in a university setting and JBI are faculty, JBI staff are faculty, how to think about developing the research programming that you're going to take forward not only as individual faculty members, but that's also going to contribute to the JBI enterprise, because you can wear those two hats, and you're going to have to work at it a bit to figure that out, but you have to, because you now are in the academic setting, and it's quite different than being in the the health services side, where you didn't have to worry about that quite as much. So you've got, I think, getting your head around all of that as an organization is still part of a change that has to happen. I think with the way you're structured with translation science and implementation, and those are the new frontiers of research that are evolving, and again, you have the opportunity to really lead the fray. That you've gone through a lot in terms of the transition in here, and you came in as a school, and then you became part of another school, and all that went along with that. But now you know where you are. You're kind of stabilized, and it's now time to really look at that aspect. I think very, very seriously, to hold your own here in this setting, and it's for here and your viability here, but it's also for your international reputation, and that's going to be equally important. Ellen's research internationally was widely recognized, and of course then it was linked to JBI, and that's going to be the same with yours as you evolve your research programs.
Rob, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to reinforce the point Margaret's just made, I know the faculty here at Adelaide is very clear that they need to focus on areas where they wish to build their expertise, and it is in the area of translation and implementation that they want to build that strength. I think that provides a wonderful opportunity to deeply embed JBI as being at the forefront, if you like, of that expertise. The other point that we made at the advisory committee on Tuesday, and I know it's been given thought, there is the joint conference in Cape Town next year, and the point we made, or the suggestion we made, which is being worked on, but I think it involves all of you, is to set out and be very clear what JBI and what JBI collaboration want to achieve from that collaboration. Be really clear that that's what you're going to the conference to seek to get out of that conference, because collaborations work well when the collaborators are really clear what it is they want from it. Just don't allow it to become a talk fest. Go there with the purpose of achieving 3 or 4 outcomes that is going to further enhance your efforts, but while at the same time creating a win-win for all of the various parties that are participating.
I mean, I think it is about reciprocal relationships, isn't it? It's no longer feeling that we're the poor relation within the field, but actually we are equals in the field in our own way, and that we do have strengths that other collaborations can actually learn from. One of the
focus in on that last point. You have strengths others don't have, and you're willing to share. But that is as a result of a collaboration that also further enhances your stuff.
And one of the things I think that certainly yesterday that I started to think about more is the way in which we engage and involve the public in our work. And I know that's something that internationally academic institutions know they have to do but struggle to do often. I think it's probably the same within evidence collaborations, and I wondered if that's an area where we might be able to perhaps work with others to make that a reality, rather than, I think, what it is in some instances, a sort of tokenistic approach to involving the public.
I'm smiling because when I was first employed at JBI, I was asked to, my whole job was to rewrite best practice information sheets for a consumer audience. Oh, little did I know. And from there went on to become the manager of consumer services in JBI and, et cetera, various other roles. It's enormously challenging, as we all know, finding, frameworks to do that in a meaningful way. And I absolutely agree that if there are ways that we could partner with others to help make that happen, that would be the right approach. We applied several years ago for, NICE approval, I think it was, for our guidelines in the UK, and we didn't get it on the basis that we didn't have public participation in the development of our resources. So, yes, absolutely something that we need to look at, enormously challenging, but perhaps partnership is the way to do it.
There's another imperative, of course. One of the directions of healthcare is, because often JBI talks about the context in which care is provided. There is a really significant emphasis, I think, emerging on empowering patients to be much more active in the determination of the care and treatment that they will get. So the work that you're actually doing, I think, one of the challenges is how do you actually build that into your synthesis and then the information being provided and how it is to be used. So it's probably one of those areas where we're going to have to think about quite new and different, being agile, innovative. Australians have become very used to the word innovative, and agility has tended to float around politically here for 12 months or so. But it's probably something that we need to think about how we build in.
I think about agility as being a bit nippy, to do with moving quickly. Okay, so I wondered if the delegates, colleagues, actually have any particular wishes and actions that you think would give us some opportunities in the future. Looks like a no. There we are, Susan. It's like Zach's on his way.
I'll try to be agile.
I don't have an action, but I just had a thought. So it is truly amazing to look at where JBI has come in the last 20 years. I mean, without any doubt. And it's clearly taken its place in the world of evidence-based medicine. And it has, as articulated earlier, certainly made an impact on many of us here today. So 20 years from now, I hope not to be in the nursing home, but I'm not going to be here. But I probably have a mobility assistance device at the time and something, else. But I guess the question is to Zoe and then to anyone else at JBI. Let's assume that I'm sitting on my porch, rocking with a glass of nice red wine, and I am reading about where JBI is. Now we're talking about 20 years forward. Where are we?
That's an easy question.
Yeah. Well, it's just where would you,
Well, look, to be honest, who knows? But I guess the thing that I'm confident about, and you would all hope that I'd be confident about this, is that, I think one of the earlier questions, Rob's response was, I don't know if we're going to manage. I think we will. I think we'll absolutely not just be around in another 20 years. I think we'll be bigger than we are now. I think we'll be, stronger than we are now. I think we'll be doing really innovative, interesting work. I don't know what that will be yet, but I think that we've now reimagined ourselves and reorganised ourselves in such a way that we have a really strong platform upon which to build. And I think that we have had a period of consolidation over the last couple of years. When I came to the position, I decided that it might be useful to pretend I'd never worked at JBI and to start as if I didn't know anything about the organisation, and to talk to the JBC and to talk to our staff in Adelaide and other key stakeholders, to start to rebuild a picture in my mind. And I think that the work that the team and I have done in Adelaide over the last couple of years have really set us in good stead. So I think when you're rocking on your porch or, wherever you might be, you will be reading about this wonderful organisation that has now been around for 40-odd years, whatever it is, and that is truly making an impact. And I think that's really where we want to get to, is that we are demonstrating, because I think we all feel it, we feel like we know it, and we can see that that's starting to happen in small ways, but that we are really demonstrating that we are making an impact for patients at the point of care. And I think we'll be able to do that.
I mean, I think that's a challenge to everyone, isn't it? That, in 20 years' time, possibly, you might be thinking about casting a slightly large shadow for someone else to step into. And at that point in time, it's up to all of us to make sure that there are people who are able to carry on and take up the mantle. Yeah.
Heather, I've got a question, and it could be for the three of them, or for anybody else in the room. We've got to start, just as you've exactly said, we've got to start looking at the next generation, because there's a number of us who've been along with that who've been in with JBI for almost 20 years, who aren't possibly going. I've got no intention of being in this room in 20 years' time. But so this next generation, where are they going to come from? How can we optimise the work that's going on with the clinical fellows, with all the development, with all the training and everything like that? I think we need an active process of really bringing people forward, so that we don't have a gap, and that it's a natural progression, in the same way that we've seen a significant progression of people over this last 20 years.
I think we've seen that, and I sort of hinted at that a little bit in the opening. I think it has been a little bit like a family business, and that there was some succession in the end. There was some succession that looked a little bit like that. And I think that's important, not just for JBI, but for the centres as well, because so often we see with centres that a director leaves and it all falls apart. I think from a sustainability perspective, we have some really strong centres doing some really good work, and I would hate to see that when the current directors of those centres retire and are rocking in their chairs, that everything falls away. And that's not to say that we don't pick up new centres in new places who are doing equally innovative work, but I think that's true of all of us in this room.
Some of us, when we retire, don't end up in the rocking chair.
I think what the discussion's really been around a critical aspect of any sustainability movement, and that is leadership planning, making sure the next generation are coming on. Any good business makes sure that there is a succession plan as an integral part of that work. I'm a layperson, so I can sort of make all sorts of predictions, but wouldn't it be wonderful if evidence-based practice, implementation, capturing the translation of researches that becomes available is embedded in training in every medical, nursing, allied health school around the world, right? And JBI collaboration is the driver of it. Surely in 20 years we would hope that all of the organisations have found the work in this space have found a common ground to be a single movement recognised by the WHO and all of the other bodies. And I'd hope that those international philanthropic entities, the really big ones, would see JBI collaboration as the best vehicle for building capacity across the developing world. You know, there are three big aims that ought to be possible with a commitment. The base is solid, secure. Let's take the next 20 years to build on and achieve those sorts of outcomes.
I couldn't agree more, Rob. And I think something that we've been thinking about a lot is the fact that there are all these different, and I alluded to this in one of the sessions earlier in the week, that there are all of these different stakeholder groups, whether it's education or government or clinical or research, you know, academia, the public, that are still to a certain extent quite siloed when it comes to evidence-based healthcare, and I think to be able to, you know, draw a bow that it is inclusive, where there is a common language used to describe, you know, what we're talking about, where we're teaching the next generation in universities in the same way that we're practicing in clinical, in the same way that we're conducting research, and that all of those different stakeholder groups are talking to each other in order to achieve, you know, that complete translational cycle. And I think if we can, at the very least, make a contribution to that, that would be a really important thing for us to achieve.
I think that's a really good place to stop. Seems quite a high to me. So thank you very much to our panel.